Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Bani Younes. I'm going to talk about the role of prosody in disambiguation of disjunctive questions in Jordanian Arabic, evidence from production and perception. Usually disjunctive questions take the form of is it X or Y, and these types of questions are divided into alternative questions and yes-no questions. What I mean by yes-no questions, disjunctive yes-no questions, because they have the X or Y, the disjunctive phrase. Now in English, Pruitt and Rolfson ran a perception study to disambiguate these two types of questions, which are string identical, and they gave this example: is Marsha allergic to dairy or soy? Now they reported you see dairy or soy, this is the disjunctive phrase, this is the X or Y. And they reported that if there is a fall and if both disjuncts, you see here, are accented, the X and the Y, if both are accented and there is a fall, then this gives us the alternative question reading. So the expected answer would be something like dairy, soy, X, Y. But if we have a final rise and just one of the X or Y, just one of them is accented, a single accented disjunct, okay, in this case we obtain a yes no reading. So the expected answer would be something like yes, no. Now, actually, they took, Pruitt and Roelofsen, they took these disambiguating cues from the literature and they used them in a perception study to see the effect of the intonation and the effect of the accents on disjuncts on the disambiguation of both types of questions. So there were and there are still prior studies that they depended on, and but what about Arabic now? Do we have studies now in Arabic? Actually, in Arabic, we lack such kinds of studies. Now, in terms of alternative questions, some examples showed that the disjuncts are accented and there is a final fall. In terms of the disjunctive yes-no questions, most studies in Arabic refer to yes-no questions, but not specifically to disjunctive yes-no questions, except Wal al-Amayri, who gave two examples in his MA thesis, and he called them list questions. The prosodic characteristics that he used in his examples were final rising contour, and he accented both disjuncts. So actually, it's not a surprise to see that the contour of disjunctive yes-no questions is the same as the contour of normal, regular yes-no questions, because disjunctive yes-no questions, after all, they are um, yes-no questions. So there are no studies, let me say, on the prosody of these string identical questions, but there is another issue of these questions in Arabic. And actually, it's the issue of which DE to use in which type of questions. That is, in English, for example, we have one disjunctive element, which is or, but in Arabic, there seems to be a variation. In modern standard Arabic, we have two, aw and am. In Jordanian Arabic, we have two, willa and aw, but which DE is used in which disjunctive question? And also, what about the other Arabic dialects, not only Jordanian Arabic, what about the other dialects? Now, actually, as you see from this table shows the variation in some Arabic dialects. In Jordanian Arabic, for example, only one study provided one example of each of alternative questions and disjunctive yes no questions, which is the study conducted by Al-Amairi, 1991. So based on the literature of DEs, we can say that it's still not, it's clear now that there is variation. There is a variation in Arabic dialects, and the picture is still not clear in all Arabic dialects. Now, if you want to narrow down our study to Jordanian Arabic, we can say that there was only one study conducted by Al-Amaire that mentioned in passing one example of an alternative question and one example of a disjunctive yes/no question, and that example used only one DE, which is Willa, so the picture is still not clear in Jordanian Arabic. And in order to make the picture clearer, we conducted actually a corpus study, a corpus search for DEs. Now, let me first talk about Arabic dialects that were in the corpus, and then I can go to Jordanian Arabic. Now, for the other Arabic dialects, we found that there are two patterns, two tendencies. Some dialects behave like English in having one disjunctive element used in both types of questions, and some dialects behave. An example of this is Egyptian Arabic, and some dialects behave like modern standard Arabic in having two disjunctive elements and in using each one of these two disjunctive elements in one question type. Kuwaiti Arabic is an example. Now, in Jordanian Arabic, as you see from the table here, only two disjunctive elements, only two disjunctive yes/no questions out of 18 disjunctive questions, only two occurrences of Willa in disjunctive yes/no questions, but none of Aw. Actually, so the picture is not clear about Aw. Can we use Aw in both or no? Though in the corpus it's not used, but this doesn't mean that this dialect doesn't use Aw in both or in either type of questions. So in all the actually there is it's not clear so far. So we still don't know which disjunctive element goes in which question type, and we still don't know the prosodic features of these questions. And this is where a production study may come in handy actually to give us more details about the prosodic features, and in the same times it will give us more details about the use of DE. Now, the production study was conducted actually to determine which, as I said, which disjunctive element can be used in both in which question type, and also to get more details about the prosodic features that might distinguish these two types of questions, because as Prout and Rolifson did, they used the prosodic features to test how these two types of questions can be disambiguated. Now, if we know which disjunctive element and which prosodic features are specified for each type of questions, then we can test these features in a perception study that replicates Prout and Rolifson's study on English. The production study was in the form of a DCT, which is a discourse completion task. There were 18 Jordanian participants. They were presented with scenarios, and I read the scenarios, and then they were asked to produce the question. We will take, in a minute, we'll take an example of this. Now, let's see this example. This is one of the scenarios that were heard by participants. As you see here, طلبت منك أمك تشتري شغلة واحدة من هدول وما حدد أي واحدة بدها بالضبط، أي واحدة بدها، مو مهم أي نوع، المهم برتقال مانجا، وانت وقفت السيارة عند محل الخضرة، لكن قبل ما تنزل من السيارة سألت من الشباك إذا عنده برتقال مانجا، وكان إذا كان جوابه عندي، راح تنزل من السيارة وتشتري. انت بس بدك تسأله إذا عنده برتقال مانجا، اسأله. Now notice that I used a slash instead of أو and willa like here, you see, and also throughout the scenario. Now, and this was actually to avoid making participants use the DE that I might have used. So the expected answer would be something like عندك برتقال أو مانجا, or عندك برتقال ولا مانجا. The results now, in terms of the DEs, the disjunctive elements, أو was used in both types of questions. ولا was mainly used in alternative questions, only 3 occurrences in disjunctive yes-no questions. Now, this means that both disjunctive elements can be used in a perception study now, though willa was more common in alternative questions than in disjunctive yes-no questions. In terms of the prosodic features, in contrast to English, the X and Y in the X or Y phrase actually were accented in both types of questions. So there seems to be no difference between disjunctive yes no questions and alternative questions when it comes to accents on disjuncts. The typical contour of alternative questions was a rise fall, and the typical contour of disjunctive yes no questions was a late rise. Of the alternative questions, rise fall, and of disjunctive yes no questions, late rise, as you see from this figure. And now we want to take these variables, the choice of contour and the choice of the ease, and put them in this perception study to test what really is the most important factor or disambiguating clue in this dialect. Now, based on the DCT, the production study, we can see that we can predict that the أو with a late rise will give us a disjunctive yes no question reading, and أو with a rise fall an alternative reading, ولا with a rise fall an alternative reading, but ولا with a late rise actually might be our mismatch condition, our, let me say, conflicting, where we have conflicting cues, because as we saw from the perception from the DCT, people tended to use willa in yes no questions less than in alternative questions. So when they hear in a perception study, when they hear willa, they might choose the alternative choice, but when they hear the rise, so they might choose the yes no interpretation paraphrase. So this might be the mismatch condition. And also, this is also because we had only 3 occurrences of willa in yes no questions in the DCT, as we saw. Now, the questions of the perception study will be are alternative questions and disjunctive yes no questions disambiguated by overall nuclear contour shape in Jordanian Arabic? Do the overall nuclear contour change? Do the overall nuclear contours change a question from an alternative question into a disjunctive yes no question, and vice versa? Does the choice of DE play any role in deciding the status of a question, either as an alternative question or as a disjunctive yes no question? And now we come to the mismatch condition, which is like a sub question of this major question. Does will have an effect on perceiving tokens as disjunctive yes no questions? And based on the above 2 major questions, we can come up with the third question, saying that which cue is the most important in disambiguating disjunctive questions in Jordanian Arabic? Is it the contour shape or the choice of the disjunctive element? The material was there were 24 lexically distinct target sentences with 36 fillers, so they heard 60 items, and each target was recorded in 4 conditions, as you see here in a Latin square design: أو let rise, أو rise fall, ولا let rise, ولا rise fall, and we had 64 listeners. Participants listened to each token in Qualtrics, and they selected one of the presented responses. One of the responses was a paraphrase of alternative question, and the other one was a paraphrase of yes no questions. And let's take an example of what participants heard. Now, هي جابت معها رولا أو جابت معها عايدة. So, this is the question, and the participant was provided with these two answers, and he had to choose one of them. But as you see here, based on the results from the corpus and the DCT, Willa was rarely used in yes/no questions. In addition, based on the researchers' intuition, putting paraphrases with Willa in yes/no question responses might shift the interpretation towards alternative questions, which I have already said it's the mismatch condition where we have a conflict. Now, in this case, to avoid having such a bias, paraphrases of yes/no questions with Willa had slashes between disjuncts, as you see here, slashes between disjuncts, and in order to be consistent, I also treated أو in the same way. So this question had أو, as you see here, but in the paraphrase that represents disjunctive yes/no question paraphrases, I removed أو, I just put a slash, just for consistency. In the analysis, we used the mixed effects logistic regression in R, the fixed effects, the choice of contour, disjunctive elements, and the random effects were the listener and the stimulus. We also controlled for other variables like gender, whether the researcher was present or not at the time of the experiment, age, education. And for the results, it turned out that contour was significant and it had a positive value, as you see. So this means that there is a main effect of intonation, as participants were more likely to choose the disjunctive yes/no question paraphrases when they heard an utterance with a rising intonation, and in terms of the DE, also it was significant, and there was a main effect of DE choice, indicating that participants tended to select the disjunctive yes/no question more than alternative question paraphrase when they heard utterances with "au," as you see here. So, in other words, both the choice of contour and the choice of DE were significant, actually, but one of them was more significant than the other, as you can see here. When we have actually Willa with a rise, now Willa with a rise was less likely to be interpreted as a disjunctive yes/no question compared to with أو with a rise. Yeah. But the interaction was not significant. Now, the conclusion: although both the rise and "أو" reached significance in maximizing the likelihood of disjunctive yes/no question responses, the coefficient associated with the rise was higher than that associated with "أو." Actually, it is 5 times higher than that of the DE coefficient, as you see here. Therefore, the effect of the choice of contour in contributing to a disjunctive yes/no question interpretation was clearly strongest. And this is consistent with the position of Jordanian Arabic in the middle of the continuum of variation, as we said. Jordanian Arabic uses both DEs in alternative questions and disjunctive yes/no questions as well, though Willa is less common in disjunctive yes/no questions, so contour was needed or is needed also to disambiguate these questions. The results also contribute to the literature, as there were no experimental studies on how these questions are disambiguated in Jordanian Arabic and also in Arabic in general. What's next? Now, as we saw from the corpus, there were dialects behaving like English, dialects behaving like modern standard Arabic. Now, the next step will be like replicating this experiment in Egyptian Arabic, and in Kuwaiti Arabic with the same Jordanian Arabic recordings. So I'll take Egyptian Arabic from this tendency, and Kuwaiti Arabic from this tendency and or preference, and I'll try to test these things. I'll use the same recordings, the Jordanian Arabic recordings, but I'll change the responses that participants will see on screen. I will change them to modern standard Arabic.